Thomas scanned the skies through the lens of the Mount Aurora Observatory's powerful telescope, a nightly ritual in his quiet corner of the world. Tonight, however, the stars seemed to whisper secrets, hinting at a mystery far beyond the usual cosmic phenomena. As the readouts on his monitor flickered, a pattern emerged, one that did not match any known cosmic or human-made signals. It was as if the universe itself had dialed into a frequency only he could discern. Another late night, Thomas, a voice called from the doorway. Dr. Marcus Green, his colleague and old friend from university days, stepped into the dim light of the observatory, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Look at this, Marcus," Thomas beckoned, pointing to the irregular data patterns flashing on the screen. "It's not a pulsar or stray satellite. I've checked and double-checked. This is something else." Marcus leaned in, his eyes narrowing with interest as he sipped his coffee. "Have you considered an extraterrestrial origin? It wouldn't be the first time someone thought they'd found the big one." Thomas chuckled, but his gaze didn't leave the monitor. "I know it sounds far-fetched, but what if it's true? What if we're not just picking up cosmic noise, but an actual message?" The 2 scientists spent hours recalibrating equipment, verifying data, and theorizing about the origins of the signal. As dawn crept across the sky, their speculative conversation was cut short by the sudden sharpening of the signal, a clear, unmistakable pattern. "This is it, Marcus. It's a structured signal. It has to be intentional," Thomas said, his voice a mix of excitement and disbelief. "Intentional and directed at Earth. Thomas, this could be the discovery of a lifetime. We need to report this." Marcus was already on his phone, notifying their contacts at NASA and SETI. As the world woke, the observatory became a hive of activity. Experts from around the globe converged on the remote site, their equipment and buzzing conversations filling the once silent halls. Amid the chaos, Thomas found himself repeatedly drawn to the screen displaying the signal, wondering about the intelligence that had crafted it. Days turned into weeks, and the global fervor only grew as the signal's origin was traced to a nearby star system, previously unremarkable in astronomical surveys. It was during one such analysis session that the impossible happened. The signal changed, and a voice, distorted by the vast distances of space, spoke through the static. "Earth," the voice said, its timbre rich and strangely melodious. "We have watched. We wish to meet." The room fell silent, every eye turning to the speakers, then to Thomas, who stood as the unintentional ambassador at this historic moment. "Who are you?" Thomas finally responded, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "We are seekers like you," the voice replied, each word carefully pronounced. "We journey through the stars, learning. We have observed your kind and wish to share knowledge." The implications were staggering. Thomas turned to Marcus, finding his friend's gaze equally awed. "We need to prepare, Marcus. This isn't just about science anymore. It's about what comes next for all of us," Thomas said, the reality of the situation settling in. "We're about to enter a chapter in human history that will redefine our place in the universe." Marcus nodded, placing a supportive hand on Thomas's shoulder. "And it starts with us, here and now. Let's not keep our guests waiting." Together, they turned back to the communication equipment, ready to bridge the gap between the stars. As they crafted their response, Thomas felt the surge of history in the making, his heart beating in rhythm with a pulsating signal that had brought them to this incredible juncture. This was the beginning of a new era, one of wonder, challenges, and the promise of uncharted alliances. Chapter 2: The Arrival. The world watched with bated breath as the alien vessel approached Earth. It glided through the atmosphere with a graceful ease that belied its massive size, finally landing in the open fields of the Nevada desert, a location chosen for its isolation and clear visibility. The site quickly became the center of international attention, with Thomas and Marcus at the heart of the activity, coordinating with teams from around the globe. "This is insane," Marcus muttered as he and Thomas prepared to approach the vessel, their protective suits snug against the brisk morning air. "Never thought I'd play the welcoming committee to actual aliens." Thomas, adjusting his helmet, gave a nervous chuckle. "Just stick to the plan. We greet, we communicate, we learn. Simple, right?" As they neared the ship, a ramp descended with a soft hiss, revealing the silhouette of a tall, slender figure. The alien, Alara, as they would soon learn, stepped into the light, her skin shimmering with a subtle luminescence that seemed to capture and reflect the sun's rays. Her eyes, large and expressive, surveyed the gathering crowd with an air of calm curiosity. "Welcome to Earth," Thomas announced, his voice amplified through his suit speakers. I'm Dr. Thomas Hale, and this is Dr. Marcus Green. We're here to assist you during your stay." Alara's voice, when she spoke, resonated with a melodious quality that made the air around her seem to vibrate. "Thank you, Dr. Hale, Dr. Green. I am Alara of the Voyan, sent as an emissary to your world. I look forward to learning from you." The initial exchange was broadcast worldwide, stirring a mix of awe and anxiety among the human population. Thomas led Alara and her small entourage to the temporary base set up near the landing site, where a more private conversation could take place. Inside the base, a team of linguists and cultural experts, including Dr. Leo Jing and Professor Amir Rajani, awaited to facilitate deeper communication. The group sat around a large, circular table, the universal symbol of equality and open dialogue. "So, Alara, what brings the Voyan to us now?" Leo asked, his voice friendly but laced with professional curiosity. Alara's response came after a thoughtful pause. "The Voyan have watched your civilization reach out into the cosmos. Your probes and signals a clear sign of your curiosity and ambition. We value learning and believe that an exchange of knowledge benefits all." Amir leaned in, his interest piqued. "What kind of knowledge are you looking to exchange?" "Technological, cultural, philosophical," Alara explained. "Your music, your sciences, your understanding of the universe, these are all of great interest to us." As the discussions unfolded, Thomas noticed the ease with which Alara absorbed information, her questions insightful, and her demeanor genuinely interested in understanding human perspectives. Marcus, meanwhile, worked on logistics, ensuring that the visitors were comfortable and that their needs were met without breaching any diplomatic protocols. The meeting extended into the evening, with each question and answer weaving a more robust tapestry of shared understanding. It was clear that both sides had much to gain from this unprecedented encounter. As the day drew to a close, Thomas escorted Alara back to her ship. "I hope today was as enlightening for you as it was for us," he said, gazing up at the stars now twinkling in the night sky. Alara smiled, a gesture that, despite her alien features, conveyed warmth and gratitude. "It has been a day of many discoveries, Dr. Hale. I believe this is the beginning of a remarkable journey for both our peoples." Watching her disappear into the ship, Thomas felt a surge of anticipation. The Voyan were here, and Earth was standing at the threshold of a new era. What mysteries would unfold? What challenges would they face together? Only time would tell, but for now he was ready for whatever lay ahead. Chapter 3. Unfamiliar Ground. Thomas adjusted the settings on his wrist communicator, glancing over at Alara as she examined the intricate carvings on the marble columns of the Smithsonian Museum's main hall. Her fingers traced each line and groove with a mix of curiosity and reverence. "Do all your buildings tell stories like this?" she asked, turning her luminous eyes toward him. "Some do," Thomas replied with a smile. "This one is a museum, a place where we preserve and display artifacts of our past, things that help us understand where we came from and what shaped us." Alara nodded slowly, her gaze drifting back to the carvings. "Voyan culture places a great emphasis on stories too. But our buildings are different. They reflect only light, shape, and motion. Solid structures like these feel so permanent." Marcus, who had been busy examining the security arrangements around the museum, joined them. "You two discussing architectural philosophy?" He grinned, but his eyes were watchful, scanning the room. "We've got more eyes on us than I'd like, Thomas." "Relax, Marcus," Thomas said, though he understood his friend's tension. "Curiosity isn't a crime." "Yet," Marcus muttered, but his posture eased slightly. He turned to Alara, forcing a smile. "So, what's your favorite part of Earth so far?" Alara tilted her head in thought. "There. It carries so many scents, flowers, rain, soil. Each breath feels alive." "Can't argue with that," Marcus said, genuinely impressed. "Most of us take it for granted." The trio continued their tour of the museum, guided by a docent eager to share Earth's history. While Alara absorbed every word, Thomas found himself more captivated by her reactions, the way her eyes widened at depictions of ancient battles, the way her expression softened at scenes of triumph and compassion. They paused before a display of a weathered astronaut suit, relic of the first moon landing. Thomas stepped closer. "This marked our first steps beyond Earth. Small compared to where you've traveled, but for us, it was monumental." Alara moved beside him. "Every journey starts with a first step. Your kind dared to dream beyond the stars. That is admirable." Her words lingered in the air, filling the quiet between them. Marcus, sensing the moment's gravity, tactfully stepped back to give them space. Thomas shifted, feeling suddenly self-conscious. Thank you. But enough about our achievements. What's the Voyan equivalent of this? There isn't one, Alara said softly. Our journeys never had such moments of risk or glory. We evolved as explorers, driven by necessity. The grandeur you attach to your ventures makes them uniquely yours. Before Thomas could respond, a commotion erupted at the museum's entrance. Protesters had gathered, shouting slogans and waving signs. Their chants were a mix of fear, distrust, and defiance, humanity's instinctive reaction to the unknown. Security moved quickly to contain the situation, but the atmosphere turned tense. Marcus stepped forward, protective instinct kicking in. We should leave. No. Thomas nodded, turning to Alara. I'm sorry. Not everyone is ready for this. Alara's gaze never left the protesters. Fear is natural when faced with change, she said, her tone devoid of judgment. But what do they fear most? Me? Or what I represent? Both, Thomas admitted, his shoulders heavy with the weight of the truth. With security's help, they made their way out through a private exit. The cool evening air greeted them, carrying the distant hum of city life. Alara seemed lost in thought as they walked, her steps slower than before. Is it always this hard to bridge the gap between different minds? She asked, breaking the silence. Thomas hesitated. It can be. Fear, pride, ignorance, they're all obstacles. But there are also moments of connection, of understanding, that make it worthwhile. Alara's eyes met his. I hope your people find more of those moments. So do I, Thomas replied, meaning it more than he realized. We're a flawed bunch, but we try. Marcus, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. You'll see a lot of both the good and the bad. It's part of being human. Alara offered a small, grateful smile. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. The trio continued their walk, finding themselves in a quiet park. Trees swayed gently in the breeze, their rustling leaves providing a soothing backdrop to the evening. They sat on a bench, exhaustion finally catching up with them. What's next on the agenda? Marcus asked, leaning back and closing his eyes. Thomas glanced at Alara. I was thinking of introducing her to music. It's one of our best forms of expression. Alara's curiosity reignited. Music? I've read about it, but experiencing it firsthand. I would be honored. Great, Marcus said, a smirk playing at his lips. As long as you're not dragging us to one of those classical marathons. Thomas laughed, the sound cutting through the lingering tension. I'll keep it simple. Something that captures the spirit of humanity. The three of them sat in companionable silence, each reflecting on the day's events and the journey ahead. Though challenges loomed on the horizon, they had taken a step, however small, toward building something new. In that moment, the world seemed a little less daunting, and the possibility of true understanding just a bit closer. Chapter 4: A Symphony of Stars. The concert hall was a blend of tradition and modernity, polished wood, cascading lights, and acoustic panels designed to deliver every note with crystalline clarity. Thomas adjusted the lapel of his jacket nervously, feeling the weight of the evening pressing down on him. He glanced at Alara, who stood beside him in an elegant garment tailored to Earth's fashion, yet imbued with a shimmering fabric of Voyan origin. The effect was striking, familiar yet otherworldly. Are you ready? Thomas asked, offering a reassuring smile. Alara's eyes sparkled, catching the light in a way that made them appear like twin galaxies. To experience your kind's music firsthand? I am ready. Marcus, leaning against a nearby pillar with a casual demeanor that belied his excitement, chimed in. Trust me, Alara, you're in for a treat. This piece, A Symphony of Stars, is one of the most beautiful compositions humanity has to offer. They made their way to their seats as the audience settled, the soft hum of anticipation filling the air. The conductor stepped onto the podium, acknowledged the applause, and raised his baton. Silence descended, thick and expectant. The first notes, delicate and ethereal, floated into the air like whispers from the cosmos. Strings swelled, woodwind sighed, and the brass provided a steady pulse, mimicking the rhythm of a heartbeat. Alara leaned forward, her entire being focused on the music. Thomas watched her out of the corner of his eye, noting the subtle shift in her expression, the widening of her eyes, the slight parting of her lips. She was captivated. This movement tells the story of humanity's longing for the stars, Thomas whispered, leaning closer. The yearning to reach beyond what we know. Ilara nodded, her gaze never wavering from the orchestra. I can feel it. It's overwhelming. As the symphony progressed, the music ebbed and flowed, depicting struggles, triumphs, and quiet moments of introspection. Each rise and fall was met with hushed awe from the audience, but none more so than from Ilara, whose connection to the performance was palpable. Halfway through, as the music swelled to a crescendo, Ilara closed her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was soft but intense. Thomas, this sound, these vibrations, do humans always pour so much of themselves into what they create? Not always, he admitted. But when we do, it becomes something special. Marcus, who had been watching quietly, leaned in. It's what makes us tick, Ilara. We're a mix of contradictions, but when we create together, well, you're hearing it now. The final movement arrived, a grand sweeping melody that captured the vastness of space, the loneliness of distant stars, and the warmth of connection. It was as if the entire universe had been condensed into a single piece of music. When the last note faded, there was a moment of silence, pure breathless silence, before the hall erupted into applause. Thomas stood, clapping along with everyone else. Beside him, Ilara remained seated, tears streaming down her face. He leaned down, concern etched into his features. Ilara, are you okay? She touched her cheeks, as if surprised by the tears. In Voyan culture, we do not cry. But this is more than sound. It is emotion made manifest. I understand now why you call it a symphony of stars. Thomas sat back down, his hand lightly brushing hers. I'm glad you experienced it with us. She turned to him, her expression both tender and intense. Thank you, Thomas, for showing me this, for sharing something so deeply human. Their moment was interrupted by Marcus clearing his throat. Hate to break this up, but we have company. They turned to see a group of journalists and officials approaching, their faces a mix of intrigue and skepticism. One of them, a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard, stepped forward. Dr. Hale, Dr. Green, and esteemed guest Ilara, may we have a moment of your time? Thomas and Marcus exchanged a glance before Thomas nodded. Of course. The questions came rapidly, each more pointed than the last. What do the Voyan hope to gain from this exchange? Can this relationship truly benefit both sides? How do you respond to the public's concerns about cultural influence? Ilara met each question with calm composure. The Voyans seek knowledge and understanding. We are not here to impose or disrupt, but to share and learn. Your music, for example, is a reflection of your journey. It inspires me to believe that we can connect through more than just words. Thomas and Marcus supported her with their own answers, emphasizing cooperation and mutual respect. As the crowd dispersed, Thomas let out a long breath. They're not making it easy, are they? They rarely do, Marcus said, clapping him on the back. But we're in this together. Ilara stepped closer, her gaze meeting Thomas's. In Voyan culture, when bonds are forged through shared experiences, they are considered unbreakable. Thomas smiled. I'd like to think that applies here, too. The three of them walked out of the concert hall together, the night air cool against their skin. Above them, the stars glimmered, as if echoing the symphony they had just heard. For a moment, all the barriers and challenges faded, leaving only the possibility of what lay ahead, an uncharted journey bound by music, connection, and a shared desire to reach beyond the known. Chapter 5, The Language of Touch. The sky above Washington, D.C. was painted with hues of amber and crimson as the sun began to dip below the horizon. Inside the private suite of the diplomatic quarters, Thomas arranged a few items on the low table, tea, some fruit, and a few delicate pastries. He'd grown used to late nights over the past weeks, but tonight felt different. There was an intimacy to this setting that was both unfamiliar and magnetic. Ilara sat cross-legged on the couch opposite him, her eyes tracking his every movement. You've been quiet today, she said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. Thomas paused, offering a small smile as he took his seat. Just thinking about everything, he admitted. The way our worlds have collided, what it means for us, for everyone watching. It's a lot to process. Ilara leaned forward, a mix of curiosity and concern on her face. Do you regret any of it? He shook his head, a chuckle escaping. No. Meeting you, this whole journey, it's been beyond anything I imagined. She nodded, her expression softening. For me as well. The Voyant are explorers by nature, but what I've learned here goes beyond what I anticipated. Your world is overwhelming, beautiful, and deeply flawed, but so full of life. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, sipping tea and allowing the weight of their words to settle. Eventually, Elara broke the stillness, setting her cup down. There is something I've been meaning to ask you. Go ahead. In your culture, there is a way humans express connection beyond words, through touch, gestures, closeness. I've read about it, seen it, but it remains foreign to me. Thomas's brow furrowed slightly. You're talking about intimacy? Yes, Elara replied simply. The kind that transcends language. You've shown me music, art, and history. But this, I would like to understand it too. Thomas felt his pulse quicken. He met her gaze, searching for any hint of uncertainty, but all he found was genuine curiosity and a touch of something he couldn't quite define. It's not something to be taken lightly, he said, his voice low but steady. It's personal. I understand, she said, and I trust you. The gravity of her words hung between them. He stood and moved closer, sitting beside her on the couch. His heart pounded as he reached for her hand. It was warm, her skin unexpectedly soft. It usually starts with something simple, he said, his voice gentle. She tilted her head, watching their hands. Like this? Yes, he whispered. Elara traced the lines of his palm with her fingertips, a light, delicate touch that sent shivers down his spine. Human touch carries so much meaning, she observed. Is it always this powerful? It can be, Thomas replied, swallowing hard, especially when there's a connection. They sat like that for a while, their hands intertwined, each touch deliberate, exploring. Slowly, Elara moved closer, her breath warm against his neck. In your music, there is often a crescendo, she murmured, her voice carrying both wonder and anticipation. Is this like that? He nodded, barely able to find his voice. Yes. Their faces were inches apart now. When their lips met, it was tentative at first, a brush of warmth and softness. But as the moments passed, the kiss deepened, their connection growing stronger with each touch and every sigh. It wasn't about lust or simple desire. It was about understanding, trust, and the melding of two beings from different worlds. Thomas's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb caressing the edge of her jawline. Elara responded by wrapping her arms around him, their bodies pressing together in a way that felt both urgent and inevitable. Time seemed to slow as they explored one another's touch, gentle caresses, soft murmurs, and shared breaths. Eventually, they pulled apart, their foreheads resting together. That was, Elara began, searching for words. More than I imagined. Thomas smiled, brushing a strand of her luminous hair away from her face. It's about connection. Trust. The way two people come together. And what comes next? She asked, her voice vulnerable, yet filled with hope. He took a deep breath, his hands never leaving hers. Whatever we want it to be. There's no script for this. Elara leaned back slightly, her eyes bright with understanding. In Voyant tradition, the exchange of touch binds souls. Not permanently, but it marks a moment in time, a shared experience that cannot be undone. Then consider this our moment, Thomas said softly. One of many, I hope. They remained on the couch, talking late into the night. They spoke of their worlds, their dreams, and the challenges that still lay ahead. As dawn broke, casting golden light across the room, they drifted into a peaceful silence, comforted by the knowledge that, for now, they had found something rare and beautiful, a connection that defied the boundaries of space and species. And so they slept, their hands still entwined, their journey together just beginning. Chapter 6, Between Worlds. The sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows over the polished steps of the United Nations headquarters. Inside, diplomats, scientists, and dignitaries from across the globe had gathered in a grand chamber, their voices a low hum of tension and anticipation. The room had been transformed into a stage for an unprecedented event, the first official council between humanity and an extraterrestrial envoy. Thomas adjusted his tie, feeling the weight of the moment pressed down on his shoulders. Nervous? Marcus asked, leaning against a marble column with an easy smile that didn't reach his eyes. Is it that obvious? Thomas replied, his voice low. You're fidgeting with your tie like it's trying to strangle you, Marcus observed dryly. Relax. We've faced bigger crowds and college debates. This isn't a debate, Marcus, Thomas said, his gaze darting toward the assembled delegates. This is history being written. And you're not alone, Marcus said, clapping him on the shoulder. We are in this together. Alara approached, her appearance striking even among the gathered dignitaries. She wore a flowing garment of silver and deep blue, representing her Voyan culture. Her eyes, luminous and filled with determination, met Thomas's. Are we prepared? She asked, her voice calm but carrying an undertone of apprehension. As prepared as we'll ever be, Thomas replied, offering a reassuring smile. Just remember, this is about dialogue. No one expects immediate answers. They may not expect it, but they will want it, Alara said, her tone thoughtful. Humans are eager for change, yet wary of it. Marcus stepped closer. And some are just wary of you, Alara. It's nothing personal. Fear of the unknown and all that. Alara nodded, her expression pensive. I understand, but fear must give way to understanding, or we will remain divided. A chime rang, signaling the beginning of the session. The trio walked side by side into the main chamber, the collective gaze of hundreds turning toward them. Cameras captured every move, every glance, every breath. Thomas took his seat beside Alara, while Marcus stood slightly behind, ready to support them both. The Secretary General, tall woman with steely gray eyes, leaned forward and spoke into the microphone. We are here today to discuss the terms of cooperation and understanding between Earth and the Voyan people. Dr. Thomas Hale, you have the floor. Thomas stood, feeling the weight of countless expectations. Thank you, Madam Secretary General. He glanced at Alara, drawing strength from her calm presence. Humanity has always reached toward the stars with a mix of hope and trepidation. Today we stand at crossroads, faced with the opportunity to engage with beings from beyond our world, beings who seek knowledge, understanding, and dialogue. Alara of the Voyan has come here not as a conqueror or an intruder, but as a guest. He paused, letting his words sink in. We are here to explore what that means for both our peoples, together. Polite applause followed, and Thomas sat, feeling the tension ease slightly. Alara rose next, her voice clear and strong. Thank you for your welcome. I understand that my presence raises questions, concerns, and even fears. It is not my intention to disrupt or impose, but to offer a bridge between our worlds. Knowledge and culture should not exist in isolation. The first question came from an ambassador seated near the front. What guarantee do we have that your presence will not lead to conflict or unwanted influence? Alara considered the question carefully. There are no guarantees in matters of trust, but we can strive for transparency, cooperation, and mutual respect. Influence, when shared respectfully, can lead to growth, not dominance. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Another delegate spoke up, his voice sharp. How do we know that your technology won't be used against us? What safeguards can you offer? Thomas stepped in. We've established protocols to ensure that any exchange of knowledge is carefully monitored and mutually agreed upon. Both sides have a vested interest in peace. The questions continued, some polite, others openly hostile. Throughout it all, Alara maintained her composure, answering with clarity and sincerity. But it was clear that trust would not come easily. During a break, Thomas and Marcus retreated with Alara to a small private room. Marcus exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. This isn't going as smoothly as we hoped. It was never going to be easy, Thomas said, pouring water into a glass and handing it to Alara. There's too much fear, too much history of conflict on our own planet, let alone with someone from another world. Alara accepted the water, her hands trembling slightly. Fear is natural, but it can be overcome with time. Marcus leaned against the wall, his gaze hard. Time is something we don't have much of. The longer this drags on, the more people will see you as a threat. We need something tangible, something that shows cooperation can work. Thomas nodded, a spark of determination in his eyes. Then we find something, an initiative, a joint project. Something that demonstrates what we can achieve together. Alara met his gaze. I am willing, but what can bridge such a wide divide? Thomas thought for a moment. Education. A shared center for learning and cultural exchange, where humans and Voyan can teach and learn from one another. Marcus's eyes lit up. That could work. It's non-threatening, and it shows we're serious about cooperation. Alara smiled, a hint of hope in her expression. Then let us build it together. When they returned to the chamber, Thomas outlined the proposal. The room buzzed with murmurs, but for the first time, there was a sense of possibility in the air. It would not be easy. Trust would be hard-won, and obstacles would arise. But they had taken a step, a small one perhaps, but a step nonetheless. As the session ended, Thomas, Marcus, and Alara walked out into the fading light of day. The journey ahead was uncertain, but they would face it together. And in that moment, the distance between worlds felt just a little smaller. Chapter 7, Heartstrings Across the Cosmos. The new Education and Cultural Exchange Center was taking shape faster than Thomas, Alara, or Marcus had anticipated. The building, nestled on a sprawling campus just outside Geneva, combined human architectural sensibilities with Voyan design principles. Transparent panels captured sunlight and energy, while graceful curves echoed the Voyan's affinity for natural forms. To Thomas, it symbolized the fragile beginning of something much bigger, a bridge between two vastly different worlds. Think we'll actually pull this off? Marcus asked, watching a group of construction workers, both human and Voyan, installing the final touches on a wing dedicated to the arts. Thomas glanced at him, his face a mix of exhaustion and determination. We have to try. It's too important to let fail. Good answer. Marcus grinned, but his smile faded quickly. Just wish everyone saw it that way. Alara walked up, having overheard the conversation. She wore a flowing garment that shimmered with changing hues depending on how the light struck it, a traditional Voyan outfit, modified for Earth's climate. There are many who doubt, she said quietly, both here and among my own people. It is difficult to change the currents of fear and suspicion. Thomas reached for her hand instinctively, their fingers interlocking. One day at a time. She nodded, but her eyes betrayed a hint of worry. There have been reports of threats against this project, against me. I know, Marcus said, his jaw tight. We've got security, but it's a thin line we're walking. Too much, and it looks like we're hiding. Too little, and we're vulnerable. Alara released Thomas's hand and took a step back, gathering herself. I do not want my presence here to become a source of division. If my leaving would ease tensions. No, Thomas interrupted, his voice firm. You're part of this. We're in it together. Running away isn't the answer. Marcus nodded, his expression grim but resolute. Agreed. Besides, leaving now would make things worse. We need to push forward, show them what we're capable of. The trio walked through the nearly completed halls of the center, taking in the sight of classrooms, auditoriums, and open spaces designed for dialogue and learning. Everywhere, humans and Voyan mingled, talking, sharing, teaching one another. It was a fragile piece, but it was real. Later that evening, the three found themselves in one of the center's courtyards. The stars shone brightly above, visible through a large glass dome. Small groups gathered around, talking in hushed tones or pointing at the constellations. I wish more of my people could see this, Alara said, her voice soft and tinged with sadness. To understand what we're trying to build. Some will, Thomas said, with time. And some won't, Marcus added pragmatically. It's a battle we're going to fight every day. A group of children approached, their eyes wide with curiosity. They were part of a pilot program to introduce young minds to the idea of interspecies cooperation. One boy, no older than 8, walked right up to Alara. Are you really from the stars? Alara crouched down, her gaze meeting his. I am. What's it like? He asked, a shining in his eyes. Vast, she said, smiling gently. And beautiful. But it can also be lonely. The boy's brow furrowed. Why lonely? Because sometimes, even when you travel to many places, you can feel far from home, Alara explained. The boy thought for a moment before reaching out and taking her hand. You're not alone here. Tears welled up in Alara's eyes, and she squeezed his small hand. Thank you. The moment was simple, but it resonated deeply. Thomas felt a surge of hope, watching as Alara and the child shared a quiet connection that transcended barriers. Marcus cleared his throat, brushing away the moisture in his own eyes. Okay, I'm officially a softie now. You always were, Thomas said, grinning. You just hide it well. Whatever you say, hero, Marcus shot back, but there was no heat in his words. The night continued, filled with laughter, stories, and tentative steps toward a shared future. But as the gathering dispersed and the courtyard emptied, the weight of reality crept back in. Thomas, Alara, and Marcus sat together, their exhaustion showing. It's moments like that which make it all worth it, Alara said quietly. But they're fleeting, Marcus reminded her. We've got a long road ahead. Maybe so, Thomas said, his voice firm. But we'll walk it together. Alara leaned her head against Thomas's shoulder, her breath soft and steady. Marcus leaned back, staring up at the stars. You know, he said, breaking the silence, I used to think the stars were cold and distant. But now, they feel closer. They are, Thomas replied, looking at Alara. Closer than we ever imagined. The three sat in the courtyard until the early hours of the morning, their hearts heavy with the challenges yet to come but strengthened by the bonds they had forged. The center was more than just a building. It was a symbol of what was possible. And together, they would fight to make it last. Chapter 8, Stars Align. The center buzzed with activity, more alive than ever. Classes had begun, with humans and Voyan alike engaging in discussions, debates, and collaborative projects. It was far from perfect. There were heated arguments, moments of mistrust, and challenges that tested everyone's patience, but progress was being made. The vision Thomas, Alara, and Marcus had fought so hard to bring to life was slowly becoming a reality. Yet the calm was tenuous. Shadows of dissent loomed on both sides. Rumors of extremist groups plotting to disrupt the exchange had reached the trio, leaving an undercurrent of tension in their every step. In a quiet corner of the center's gardens, Thomas and Alara walked hand in hand. Flowers bloomed around them, their colors vivid under the late afternoon sun. You're thinking again, Alara said, her voice soft but knowing. I can't help it, Thomas admitted. There's too much at stake. Every time we take a step forward, it feels like something's ready to push us back. Alara stopped, turning to face him. The path is never easy, but I choose to walk it with you. He squeezed her hand, drawing comfort from her unwavering resolve. I know. It's just, sometimes it feels overwhelming. I have felt that way many times since coming here, she confessed. But we have each other, and we have Marcus. Together, we can face whatever comes. As if on cue, Marcus appeared, his expression serious. Hate to interrupt, but we have a situation. They followed him to the security control room, where a monitor displayed a group of protesters gathering outside the center's gates. Their signs and chants were louder, more hostile than before. The security chief turned to the trio, his jaw tight. They're demanding a meeting with you, Dr. Hale. And with Alara. Thomas's stomach twisted. What are their demands? Mostly rhetoric about keeping humanity pure, Marcus said, a hint of disgust in his voice. But they're organized, and they're not going away. Alara stepped forward. I will speak to them. No, Marcus and Thomas said simultaneously. It's too dangerous, Thomas continued. They're looking for a fight, Alara. And if I hide, it will only validate their fear, she countered. I will go, but not alone. Thomas hesitated, then nodded. We'll do it together. The three of them walked out to the gates, flanked by security. The crowd's shouts intensified, their faces a mix of anger and fear. Thomas stepped up to the microphone, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. We hear your concerns. We're here to talk. A man stepped forward, his expression hardened by years of suspicion. We don't want talk. We want answers. Why should we trust them? He pointed at Alara. What's to stop them from taking over, from changing everything we are? Alara stepped forward, her presence calm but commanding. We are not here to take over. We seek knowledge, understanding, and coexistence. Change is inevitable in any society, but it can be shaped by mutual respect. Words, someone shouted. They mean nothing. Thomas raised his hand. Words are where we start, but actions matter too. Look around. Inside this center, people are learning, working together. Change is happening because we choose to engage, not to fear. The tension was thick, but a few murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The leader of the protesters stepped closer, his gaze hard. And what happens when this falls apart? When trust is broken? We rebuild, Alara said simply. Together. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, some of the protesters began to lower their signs. The leader's face softened, just slightly. We'll be watching. So will we, Marcus replied, a hint of defiance in his voice. As the crowd dispersed, Thomas exhaled, feeling like he'd been holding his breath for hours. That could have gone a lot worse. But it didn't, Alara said, placing a hand on his arm. Because we faced it together. That night, the trio gathered in one of the center's observation rooms. The glass dome above provided a clear view of the stars. Marcus, leaning back in his chair, sipped a glass of whiskey. "To not getting killed today," he said with a wry smile, raising his glass. "I'll drink to that," Thomas replied, clinking his glass. Alara held up her own glass of Voyan nectar. "To what comes next?" They drank in silence, the enormity of their journey settling over them. Thomas leaned back, his gaze fixed on the stars. "Do you think they'll ever accept us, truly accept us working together?" "Some will. Some won't," Alara said, her voice thoughtful. "But acceptance isn't a destination. It's a journey." Marcus groaned. "That's way too philosophical for this hour." They all laughed, the tension melting away for a brief moment. As the laughter faded, Thomas took Alara's hand. "Whatever happens, I'm glad we're doing this together." "As am I," she said, her eyes reflecting the starlight. The three of them sat in quiet contemplation, their bond stronger than ever. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for now, they had each other, and that was enough. Above them, the stars shone brightly, a reminder of the vast universe they were only beginning to understand. And beneath those stars, three people, two from Earth and one from beyond, continued to forge a path toward a future they believed in. Together.